partner with Axon, you immediately gain access to a full range of products and solutions designed to meet the complex needs of today's grower. We carry all major brands and sizes of tires and wheels. We specialize in large diameter wheels for large equipment. We have one of the largest OEM replacement wheel inventories in North America. Known for extreme flotation setups, duals, and triples, we have wheels for all makes and models of tractors, sprayers, combines, and grain carts. If we don't have the wheel in stock, we'll custom build, sandblast, and paint in-house. There isn't a more vast inventory in North America dedicated to helping dealers move more iron. With facilities on the West Coast and in the heart of the Midwest, leverage our 230,000 square feet of indoor inventory to solve any problem a grower may have. Move more iron with Axon.
Moving iron.
Hello and welcome to Moving Iron Podcast. Marcus with Shawn Hackett. This edition of the Moving Iron Podcast is live again, so I had a chance to go with Shawn here at a meeting that I'm at. He was the speaker at it, and I had to take advantage of him here being with me live. So, Shawn, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. We had a good meeting today.
Yeah.
Went over a lot of different cycles and stuff, and had a good discussion. So I thought a lot was learned by all.
I think so. So, cool thing about Shawn, he's on here twice a week, and every time he comes on, I learn something new, and then every time I listen to him speak, there's something I didn't know that he talks about. So, I think let's talk about this for a minute. So, you brought up the moon rotational cycle and how it tilts 5 degrees every 18.6 years.
The Earth spins around its axis, but every 18.6 years it wobbles 5 degrees off center for 3 years before reverting back to normal.
Okay.
And it does this constantly.
Okay.
And so we know that the moon rotates. So as the Earth wobbles, the interaction of the gravimetric force of the moon to the Earth gets distorted.
Yeah.
We know that the sun is also hugely impactful on its gravimetric force. And of course, it's also experiencing that 5 degree. And of course, the sun's also wobbling in its own situation. So that cycle repeats every 18.6 years for 3 years. And the oceans, or the thermohaline current, which equilibrates all the ocean temperatures around in the Earth, which the Gulf Stream, as an example, is one part of that, either speeds up, which means more of the warm water goes to the north, which warms the oceans, or it slows down, which means the warm water stays to the south and it gets colder up to the north. And every 60 years, this Earth Moon nutation cycle slows the current down. So the Woods Hole Institute just recently, they measure this thermohaline current all the time, and they noticed that in the last 5 years it's been down 15% from what it was, showing that we're getting this slowdown, and hence why this Atlantic Ocean moving to the cold phase is due in the 60-year cycles. From 1965 says 2025 is when Atlantic should start to get cold again. We also mentioned about this pool of water northwest of Greenland.
Yeah, that was the one. That's the thing. We've talked about that before. And I remember you talking about the last conference I watched you at, where you're talking about it. It goes, forgive me, I forget, counterclockwise, and it reverses. It goes clockwise or vice versa. And when it reverses, that's when it spills the cold water out into the Atlantic.
Right. The way the cycle works is when the Atlantic gets warm and the temperatures get warm, the glacier melts and all this cold, fresh water gets trapped in this Beaufort gyre, they call it. It's this body of water, and it spins like this, and it's like a vortex, just keeps it in there. And then the way the cycle operates is that as enough of this cold water gets in there through a process of osmosis is really what it is. It reverses the current back around, and then all this cold, fresh water gets dumped into the North Atlantic, thereby slowing the current further, thereby cooling the ocean further. And then it also reduces the salinity of the central to North Atlantic, which then further cools the cycle.
Right.
So it's really the trigger. So like the last time we had this, as I said to the conference today, if you put in your computer the Great Salinity event, literally the Great Salinity event, you'll see it was a period from the mid 1960s, into the mid 70s where we saw this salinity fall off as this Beaufort Gyre dumped all this cold water in and set off a really, really cold 10 to 15 years. And so we should be heading back in. We know the Pacific is already cold. That's already happened. And now we're just waiting for the 60-year cycle to trigger in 2025. And all the readings, because I keep tabs of what the Oceanic Woods Hole Institute's saying, and they think that they just had a paper like a month and a half ago, and they think imminently, and I mean they use the term imminently, think this Beaufort Gyre is going to reverse and dump all this water in. And once that happens, then the climate really dramatically changes almost overnight. It really does. Because when you have a warm, and then we discussed today the precipitation changes that occur when the Atlantic and the Pacific are cold versus when the Pacific is cold and the Atlantic is warm. It's a pretty significant change in precipitation patterns and in temperature patterns. That goes along with the grand solar cycle that's already been established and in place. You don't normally get both.
Right.
In the 70s, it was just the sea surface temperature cycle. In the Dalton minimum, we didn't have the sea surface temperature cycle. It was just the grand solar.
Right.
So you have to go back over 400 years to see both of these cycles in almost perfect synchronicity,
Yeah.
which means maximum weather volatility, maximum cooling of temperature potential, and just maximum effect of adverse weather. That's why when we showed the last two times that we had both oceans cold, which was the 65 to late 70s and the period from 1900 to 1920, they were wildly bullish periods for agricultural commodities because the weather was so challenging in shrinking the growing cycle.
Yeah.
And in reducing the amount of northern ground that could be used in productive agriculture. And so that's where I believe that we're heading again, and we're not quite there, but almost there.
Yeah. So so you showed a slide today, and it was where the ocean temperatures were at as of February 2023 and where ocean temperatures were at as of February 2012. And they were, I don't want to say they were identical twins, but they were as close. They're maternal twins for sure. You know what I mean? So
they were very, very close to each other.
Right.
Now, I mean, see, what we try to do, we're trying to make these what seems to be crazy forecasts, but we're trying to verify them as we go along the way. As we try to look for these signposts. One of the signposts, as we talked about, is El Nino needs to not come in spring. Well, that's to be determined, but our work says it won't, but we'll see. The second thing is you want to look for similarities in sea surface temperatures from past droughts. And you want to look at similarities in weather patterns compared to last droughts. So in 2012, in February 6th, and we had, as you said, we had a very similar, almost identical.
Around the world.
Around the world.
Everything.
Now, just because it's similar doesn't mean it will wind up being similar come summer, but it means that you have the DNA
Right.
of what a drought looks like. And we highlighted this very, very cold ring that is off the coast of California. If you think this through, the air above the cold sea surface temperatures sinks, and you have hot water to the west.
Right.
And so that the precipitation goes this way. So it sucks the moisture, puts a dome over the United States. It's a very common feature to have that cold ring in these major droughts. We had it in the Dust Bowl 34. We had it in 2012. We have the ring now. And then we showed a chart of what the sea surface temperatures look like in July 6, 2012. And there was a note, you notice that the water in the Central Pacific warmed considerably, but it was not warm enough to be an El Nino.
Right.
It was warm enough to be neutral.
Yeah.
And the reason that's important is because in a normal La Nina, sinking air, rising air, you get this very active Walker cycle.
Right.
In a La Nina, in an El Nino, rising, but if you have a situation where you don't have it hot or really cold in the central, the air is not doing anything. So the Walker cycle really kind of becomes, it gets taken off the table.
Yeah.
So if you plant a high pressure system in the middle of the country, the Walker cycle is not in a position to knock it off its kilter, and it just sits there. And that's what happened in 2012, 88. And you know, it's a pretty consistent pattern. So we want the three things we're really looking for is that ring going to still be there in, let's say, May? Is El Nino not going to arrive? Is it going to be more neutral? And the last thing that we look for is these similar weather patterns elsewhere. So, example, we showed a chart today where South America, you know, drought in Argentina, but Brazil was perfect. Well, that was exactly what they had in 2012 growing season.
Right.
Same exact pattern, 1934.
Right.
And so we have that now. That does not guarantee the same outcome, but it says that the same upper airflow pattern that created those very similar patterns are in place today. And then we looked at something else, which may seem esoteric, but Mount Washington in New Hampshire broke the minus 47-degree record cold that was made in January of 1934, which was the January before the Dust Bowl, worst of the Dust Bowl year. We broke that this past month, and actually also broke record cold wind chill factor. So once again, another very unusual event happening that the last time was ahead of a major drought. So we're seeing some similar signs that we might be on to, you know, something like this. So we'll have to see. We are going to start the season off well. We've got some good moisture, especially in parts of Nebraska and South Dakota, where it's been very dry. That's going to allow for some pretty good planting. So I think the grain markets are going to correct. I think today corn was down 13 on the nearby, and I think we might be done with South America, and we're getting ready to trade a good planting start. So I'm expecting a setback. I have been expecting a setback, but I think once we get to like the first part of April, we trade that. Then if the signs are showing up that, you know, a drought should return. If you really think this through, the worst case scenario for production is to have good moisture in the spring, because you have a shallow root system that develops for corn instead of going down deep, so that when the hot, dry weather comes in May or June, the very surface dries out really, really fast.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the subsoil can stay for a while, but if the roots aren't down deep and they stay on the surface, you get a flash drought very, very quickly. Yep. So that's what we're looking for. We got some months to go through, some bearish trade to go through, but we'll just have to see. But so far, you know, we like what we're seeing in terms of the Gleisberg cycle, kind of giving us some initial signals at least. Now, remember, I don't know if you'll remember 2012, they swashbuckled the grain markets down into April. I mean, just killed it. I think they traded corn briefly under 5 during that time, and then they turned the drought on it, and it just over 8. So there could be a really, really good opportunity for livestock producers to buy some feed here. And for those farmers that have been very aggressive with their cash sales, or maybe, you know, oversold or whatever, you know, maybe a good opportunity to maybe put some counter hedges on some of those sales and say, you know what, you know, maybe I want to just make sure in case, you know, this crazy nut job Shawn Hackett is right and this does happen, you know, that I haven't sold what looks like a good price, but it may turn out to be a terrible price in the end.
Right.
So
yeah, no, good points there. All right. So we talked about this in a lot of detail, and kind of goes back to what we're talking about here just a minute ago with the way things are shaping up and the way things are looking. Wheat to rice ratio. Wow, I messed that up. Wheat to rice ratio. When you're looking at that, so what's really kind of been the glue that's held the world together from just utter famine just kind of sweeping across the country and incredibly high in food inflationary costs is what India's been able to export out to the world, right? As far as rice goes, and wheat to that matter. I mean, they've done a pretty good job of making sure that they can export everything that they can. And they're taking advantage of price, right? So they're taking care of stuff there. The way this is shaping up, and if things continue down the same path that they're going in, and you're correct, and things mirror what we saw happen in 2012 with the way things were set up, we should see a significant drought in the key growing areas of Russia in Asia, specifically India, when you're looking at what that looks like.
Whether El Nino will rise by spring, summer, or waits till the fall, like we think it's going to, it's still a transition year.
Right.
And we showed all, what people have to understand, there's a difference between transitioning from La Nina to El Nino if it's not a multi-year, like sometimes you just get 1 year La Nina, and that's a very, very different outcome. Right. And it's a multi-year La Nina after a trough of a solar cycle. And so we went over all the years, 1911, 1918, 1951, 1958, 1976, 2001, were all multi-year La Ninas that went into a transition year that La Nina ended and we went towards El Nino. And we showed a Palmer drought severity index for India, for winter wheat areas of Russia, and for spring wheat areas of Russia, and showed that the tendency is for both areas to be very dry in the spring and the summer of the transition year. We know in rice specifically that China had a 1 in 500 year drought in the South Yangtze River Valley, which is where they grow most of the rice. And so the rice prices have been surging all year long. Mm-hmm. India, however, has gone from exporting, like you said, 3 million metric tons maybe 5 years ago to exporting like almost 20 million metric, like crazy exports. That's kept the system from breaking apart. If India, now remember they did a little thing where they had a ban on rice exports for a little while because their crop last year had some issues, but then they said maybe we'll sell a little bit. But if this year they get into a more protracted drought, as the history would suggest, and remember we're expecting El Nino to really be around in 24, means this is a multi-year problem for India. Don't also remember Southeast Asia has a high correlation to drought. Thailand, Vietnam, very, very big exporters of rice. You know, you could really find yourself with the rice market being in a very, very bad situation. Yeah. And if the wheat market gets itself back into some concern with geopolitics, meaning some renewed drought, the wheat rice combination may no longer save the day. And we're already seeing things in Ghana or in Nigeria, Sri Lanka earlier in the year. Last year, we're seeing some dominoes starting to fall in places that typically see inflation and food creating chaos first. And so, we showed a chart about ending stocks, grain ending stocks declining for 6 years straight, and that the stocks to usage ratio of all grains is at the lowest level since the 2012 drought year. So I don't think we have a lot more room that we can move this down. Deep down, as I mentioned at the meeting, deep down, I hope the Gleisberg gets delayed until maybe 25, and it gives us a chance to get some buffer stock back in, because to do it right now would really add maximum humanitarian consequences to an already very delicate situation. It's not up to me to decide how this is going to play out, but I just hope. Remember, the Gleisberg can happen in any one of the next 3 years. I just hope it's 25, but we'll have to see.
Yep. Okay. All right, man. Tell you what, I think that's a good place to stop, Shawn. Folks want to reach out to you and get more information about what it is that you're doing at Hackett Financial. What's the best way to do that?
Website, our Twitter page is at Faradex. It's F as in Frank, ERID as in dog, EX11. Our LinkedIn page, which is either look up Shawn Hackett or Hackett Financial Advisors, or go to our website at Hackett, HACKETT, advisors.com. From time to time, we'll put on some interviews and some things that kind of update some of these cycles and give people some insights to where we are, where we're going. So,
okay, man, it's always been a pleasure.
Great.
Good to see you, man.
Absolutely.
All right. I'm Casey Seymour with Moving Iron Podcast. Check me out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Moving Iron LLC, LinkedIn at Moving Iron Podcast, and see the video version of this over on the YouTube channel, Moving Iron Podcast. Go to MovingIronLLC.com for everything Moving Iron related, and get all the information for the Moving Iron Summit coming up here in Nashville, Tennessee, September 11th through the 13th. We've got a great speaker by the name of Sean Glass coming on, retired Navy SEAL. Talk a lot about what we see happening here and talk about some transitional things that we see happening as far as how we move into this brave new world of technology, and how leadership's going to play a part of that. So as you're looking at that, if you want to be the first 150 people to sign up for that meeting, Axon Tire will take care of that first $50. So if you're interested in doing that, go to the upper right-hand corner, click on Moving Iron Summit tab and fill out that information there, or just send me an email at MovingIronPodcast at MovingIronPodcast.
And I think your neurological doctor said it's very important that they don't wait until the last minute because it's not good for your anxiety and neurological disorder that you have.
That's a good point, Shawn. I'm glad you brought that up. So the earlier the better. It'd be great. So with that, in case you see more, Shawn Hackett, Smooth Smart, folks, out.
Moving iron in the 21st century.